Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to do something a little different. I want to talk a little bit about creativity, but I want to use creativity as it's happening. There's this new show called Get Back. I think it's on Disney Plus. I've only seen clips of it online. I've grabbed a couple of them because I thought they were really important. It's all of one scene. But it's basically about the Beatles making one of their albums, and this is kind of, I guess it's like capturing a lot of the behind the scenes footage and better sound and stuff that we haven't really seen before. And I've seen one scene that I want to talk about today, which really seems to capture the creative process. And I kind of want to show you the clip and then talk more about it. But to kind of set it up is the Beatles are kind of hitting a deadline on when their next album has to come out. I'm not really sure why the Beatles have a deadline, but that's what's going on. And anyway, John Lennon is not really producing the songs that he used to. Ringo was never really the songwriter type. He wrote a few, but not much. And George Harrison was writing songs, but Paul and John just they weren't all that into them, and so they didn't really get used. And that was kind of part of the tension between the band, and that's sort of the backdrop of most of the show. So this scene that I'm going to show you here in a minute is Paul working out a song. He just knows that they need to have another song to work on, and so he's just going to sit down and work it. And the song that he's working on turns out to be Get Back, which is one of their bigger songs ever. So anyway, so with that backdrop, just watch this video. It's only a few minutes, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, it's good. It's, musically and it's great.
Get back, get back, get back where you belong. Get back, get back, get back to where you belong. She thought she was a woman, but she was
Okay, well, that was pretty cool, I thought at least. So let's kind of break down what's going on. First, when you watch Paul is sort of the impetus of this whole creative process. But what he does basically is he just picks up his guitar, he sits down, and he just starts strumming. And he's really just kind of like making noise. I mean, it's not like horrible noise, but if you know the song Get Back, you can kind of hear elements of the song in there. And then he just kind of keeps strumming until he finds something he likes, and he just kind of keeps working with that. And then he just starts making noise with his mouth. No words at all, just kind of playing with the tone and the up and down and stuff. He at some point he just kind of closes his eyes and he's just kind of and Paul is really in a trance state at that moment. He isn't paying attention to what anyone else is doing. He's not really paying attention to what the George and Ringo are doing, who are just sitting right across from him. He's not judging what he's doing. He's not trying to pick it apart or figure out anything else. He's just kind of almost like a child that just sort of making a big mess, but in that mess he's finding these nuggets that he likes, and then and without judgment, or probably even really without consciously being aware of it, he's just grabbing that nugget and then building onto it, finding another nugget and building onto that, and after a while it starts taking this very, very rough shape. And then if you watch Ringo and George, who are the only two with him throughout most of this process, Ringo's very opposite. He's just sitting there. And he's just watching Paul for a little while. He's barely moving. He's tapping his foot. Of course, Ringo's the drummer. So what he's doing is he's watching Paul, and he's listening for that beat that he can put under this noise that basically Paul is producing. And for a long time, he just doesn't seem to be moving or anything else. And then he kind of gets into it. And he starts clapping along. He starts almost predicting where Paul is going with this, even if Paul doesn't maybe 100% know where he's going with this. And so he's able to jump in. He starts doing like the chorus, get back and get back. And then George, poor George, looks like he had a rough night. He kind of starts off picking a little bit, but then he just sort of gives up. And then he's looking around, and he's yawning, and he's not really looking like he's paying attention. I think at one part he just kind of puts his head down, like he just doesn't even want to be there. And then all of a sudden he just sort of perks up and he just starts playing. And I think what's different about all of these, and then John, we'll talk about him real quick. John just sort of comes in at the very end. All these guys have already sort of been working on this stuff. We don't know how long this is. Probably not very long. I mean, there's enough time for George to get up. I mean, for Ringo to get up and go get behind the drums and start drumming. But you can kind of tell, like, they've probably just been working on this for a few minutes. John just walks in the room, picks up his guitar, and he's like, "Oh, what are we doing?" Okay, and he just starts playing right along with it. He doesn't need to hear all the other stuff that's come before it. He just can kind of feel what they're doing and just sort of jump right on in, and all he needed was that jumping off point that the other Beatles were giving him. And what I liked about this is it tells us a lot about the creative process. One, it's messy. It is very messy. I think a lot of people who are outside the creative process think that it tends to go one or two ways. That it's extremely easy because the white dove of music just comes down and lands on Paul's head, and this fully formed Get Back song is in his skull, and he just has to write it down, and the other Beatles just do what he says, and it's great and wonderful. That's not all what happened. On the flip side, a lot of people outside the creative process think that, oh, he probably agonized on it for days and months and years, and he's been fine-tuning every little piece of note and every little piece of music and making it all perfect, and he's just been hammering on this thing for forever until it was just perfect. And then he presented it. Wasn't like that either. And I think a lot of us kind of think writing is like that either, or it's supposed to be like that. Let me put it that way. We think writing is supposed to fall into one of those camps. Either the muse just comes down and I get a fully formed novel into my head, and all I've got to do is just transcribe it and then publish it out, put it out into the world, or it's this thing that I should like slave over, and it should be agony and torture, and I have to spend years perfecting this one story, agonizing over every comma and over every word choice. And that's really doesn't have to be that way either. What this shows us is that he can just sit down and just start strumming and make noise and make a mess and just kind of see what comes out of that. The creative process is always messy. Exactly how that mess looks is a little different for everybody, but it's usually always messy. Also, what the scene tells us is there is no one way to be creative. Paul was writing the song by, like I said, entering basically a trance state. He's just making a mess. He's making noise. He's just kind of seeing what comes out, what feels good coming out of his mouth, what sounds right to him, and just kind of going along with it. Ringo was paying very close attention. He was very attentive, was very aware. He was trying to figure something out. This was almost like a logic puzzle for him, which from what I've heard from other drummers, they say, because there's a lot of math involved in having the rhythm, that they do tend to think about music differently than other musicians. But yeah, he was sitting there, he was like working out a problem that Paul was presenting to him in this mess. He was trying to find order in the chaos. Then there was George, who seemed to be not at all involved until he was. And then all of a sudden he was just strumming away, and it was like he had also figured something out. But for a lot of us, I think writing can be like that. Sometimes what you need to do is sit down and just put words on a page. And don't judge them. Don't try and figure them out. Don't try and sort out what you like and what you don't like. Just kind of let the words just sort of come out and see where they start to flow. The beauty of it is now we have word processors, and so you can go back and cut out the stuff that doesn't make sense. In a way, that was sort of what Paul was doing. He was just able to just sort of strum along, knowing that we're not recording right now. It doesn't matter what I do. I can just ignore this. But once I get it figured out, well, then we'll turn on the recording equipment, and we'll start actually making a song. And that can be how you do with your writing, too, is you can even have, like, not even like a rough draft, almost like a sketch pad, like what artists make for a sketch pad. Over here, you're just putting words on a page and just see what happens. And then when you start to see something that you like and that you want to kind of work with and build on, well, then you start a new document and you start just putting the actual story there so it's coherent. People don't want to see the mess. Not only do they not need to see it, they don't want to see it. But sometimes your writing style is more like a Ringo, where it's very deliberate. This is a lot of the plotters are like this, that they want to know what's the opening scene, what's the rising tension, what's the climax, what's going to be the day. They want to at least have some note cards built out there, and they want to have a character sketch and know, have their magic system worked out beforehand and all. They're definitely trying to plot and plan this sort of stuff. And then there's the George, which I think a lot of people tend to underestimate, which is the notion of you can just sort of let creativity just happen in the back of your head, and to the outside world you're not doing anything. This is a tricky one because sometimes you aren't doing anything. You are just laying around watching TV. But sometimes if you try and force the creative process, it doesn't work. And you kind of need to be in that relaxed state of where it looks like you're really not paying attention, you're not reading, you're not really involved in anything. But the reality is in the back of your head, your creative process is working something out. It's trying to figure out what its inspiration, and usually what it's doing is looking for the inspiration to come out. And then I think what you need to also accept is a lot of times this creative process will look different, not only between different people, but different projects, maybe even different days. On the exact same project that you're working on, from one day to the next, your creative process may change. Maybe one day you need to be a Paul, and you just need to start putting words on a page and just see what comes out, because you've tried the Ringo method, but you can't plot it out, and so you don't know what's going to happen. And then there's other days where you just, like George, where you need to be kind of just not in front of your computer, not trying to write, and just let your brain just sort of roll around with these ideas. Or sometimes you need to be like a John, where you just need someone else to kind of give you an idea, so that way you can kind of run with it. That you get a writing prompt, or someone just says something. Maybe you use one of these sort of random techniques like we talked about before in one of the inspiration videos. Of you use tarot cards or story cubes or writing prompts from a book or something else to just sort of give you that outside idea, and like, okay, well, play with this. Just try this and see how this goes. And you know, the idea needs to come from someone else, and it can't, for whatever reason, it's not coming to you. But like I said, I think it's a great example of how the creative process can work. And I think the biggest part of all of this, the biggest take-home message is stop judging yourself for how you create, and don't judge others for how they create. And when other people, YouTubers for example, are telling you writing needs to look like this, the creative process looks like this. You can't edit on a blank page, so you need to put words on a page. You need to plot out your outlines, because if you don't know where you're going, then how are you going to get where you're going to be? You know, all the big, screenwriters use the 3-act structure, and there's 7 plot points or whatever it is. And if you don't do that, you'll never have a big. That's all bullshit. That's probably the best thing. It's all bullshit. Your creative process is how your creative process works. The biggest challenge, I think, of being any kind of creative is figuring out what your creative process is. And then the next challenge is letting go of it when it's not even serving you anymore at any particular time for a particular project. And so, anyway, I hope you found this useful. Like I said, the big thing is don't judge yourself. Just write. Keep going. The more you write, the better you get, the more practice you get, and the more you figure out about yourself. Remember, writing is a mental game, and just as you're trying to put a story on a page, you're actually kind of trying to figure yourself out, and this is a good way to kind of do it. But anyway, I got to get back to the writing. I'm still working on Nadja the Witch Warrior. I'm also working on the big Kickstarter, which will be out in February of next year, so keep an eye out for that, and I will talk to you later. Bye.